Welcome to the Thursday edition of the 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Blake Lovell, Barry Allen joining me today. Gentlemen, we are headed into week 4 of baseball. And let me start with you, Barry. What is standing out to you at this point with the SEC?
Well, I think the one thing that sticks out to me is the league is just top heavy. We went into the season, and I still think we have good teams, but we went into the season thinking, we could get 10, 11, 12 teams in the NCAA tournament. And based on what I've seen through 3 weeks, I just don't think that's possible. Unless there's some, remarkable turnarounds by some of these teams. I mean, you're looking at, Georgia, Missouri, Texas A&M are all 3-6 in the league. Then you have Alabama 2-7, and then you have Auburn and LSU at 1-8. I mean, I'm trying to find a case where any of those 6 teams, can get in a regional right now, and I don't see that based on who they still have to play. And Georgia's got Vanderbilt starting tonight. I mean, it'll be 3-9 come Saturday afternoon, and I think just how top heavy the league is. I mean, you got a 8-1 Vanderbilt, and then you got Tennessee, Arkansas, Ole Miss at 7-2, and South Carolina at 6-3, and then 3 teams: Florida, Kentucky, and Mississippi State, all at 5-4, and then there's a drop off after that. I think that's the real big surprise. That it's just not, the league doesn't appear, at least through 3 weeks, to be as deep as we thought it was.
Yeah, to me, it's Vanderbilt and Arkansas. Then it's, although I think this blurs, right? I think Vanderbilt, to me, is clearly the one. Some people might disagree. I think really, now that I think about it, to me, Arkansas, the Mississippi schools, Tennessee, maybe South Carolina, Florida, to me, I think that's more difficult to separate those teams. Arkansas is the 2 right now. But to me, down the line, separating those next 6 is going to be tough. And I wouldn't even rule out that, one of them could overtake Vanderbilt. I don't think it's likely, but I think it's possible.
It's possible. I would say Arkansas would be the next best team now, and they play at Ole Miss this weekend. And Ole Miss is, at least for the foreseeable future, is without Tim Elko, who injured his knee Monday against North Alabama in a non-conference game. But Ole Miss has had injuries this year, and they've overcome. Shottinger missed 8 or 9 games with a hamstring injury, and they persevered without him. And Baker, their first baseman's been out for quite a while, and they've plugged in and adjusted there. So, Elko's a little bit different player for them, but they've had a lot of injuries, and they've persevered, and they're 7-2, and they're at home playing Arkansas this weekend. And they go to Mississippi State next weekend. So arguably their 2 toughest series in the West are coming up the next 2 weeks. And, we'll see how they fare without Elko in the lineup. But, I still like their club. They can fix the Sunday guy, Derek Diamond. He's been kind of up and down, but, I certainly think, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Florida, even, those 6 teams, I think Friday night they could be in a certain order, and then Saturday they could be in a different order, and Sunday they could be in a different order, and it may be that way all the way till the last day of the regular season till we get to Hoover. I mean, and may even be that jumbled then. We may be, well, there's 4 teams tied for 3rd, and here's how we're going to break the tie. That wouldn't surprise me either. So it's just the top part's really good, and maybe Vandy, Arkansas, maybe just a little bit ahead of everybody else, but I don't think there's a ton of difference. Really in 2, 3, 4, and then, 5 and 6 right there, just a little bit below them maybe. But I certainly think that at the top half, there's a lot of depth there.
Well, people may say, why do you say you think Vandy's the clear one, and then it's maybe those next 6 closer than people think? On the Vanderbilt end, I look a lot at runs scored and runs allowed and not just record. I want to see, are you winning a lot of close games or losing a lot of close games? Because those things tend to even out over time. If people are familiar with the Pythagorean record, which takes the runs you've scored and the runs you've given up, and uses that to predict what your record would usually be. Vanderbilt is 24-3, which is exactly what its actual record is. Arkansas is 21-7. So that says it is overachieved by 3 games. Vanderbilt has scored a dozen more runs than Arkansas and given up 40 fewer. Now, having said that, strength of schedule is a big factor here. Vanderbilt 67 according to the RPI and Arkansas 4. But if people want to know kind of why we think Vanderbilt is the top team and we haven't really budged from that in a couple of weeks, I think at least from my point of view, that's a good summation of that.
And also the fact they have the best pitching and the best offense in the league. I mean,
yeah, that too. And I think their offense gets underrated. Kendall Rogers and Aaron Fitz said this yesterday on their podcast. Apparently, I didn't see this, but I made the point that Vanderbilt's got 4 hitters in contention for SEC Player of the Year too, just from the hitting standpoint. So that's a team that has got parts, and it's also endured a lot of injuries to its hitting already, and it just keeps on chugging.
Yeah, I mean, Dominic Keegan's missed several games for them, and he's still leading the league in hitting. I mean, he still has enough at bats, to qualify for the batting title, and he's leading the league in hitting at 408. The thing that jumps out for me for him is the 18 extra base hits. He's got more extra base hits than he has singles. He's got 13 singles and 18 extra base hits, 10 doubles, 2 triples, 6 home runs. So he leads the league in hitting. And then you look down here at the pitching and you go, oh, their pitchers have the 2 lowest ERAs in the league, and Leiter and Rocker, at 132 strikeouts. And, Vanderbilt by 0.40 leads the league in earned run average, 231 to Mississippi State's 276. And Vanderbilt's the only team in the league hitting over 300. They're hitting 316 for the year. The next best team is Auburn, and they're only hitting 298. They scored 224 runs. They scored more runs than anybody. And, they got a dynamic leadoff hitter, and that may be a podcast in itself one day, or a story for us one day in itself, that just how many really, really good leadoff hitters we have in this league. I mean, obviously you would think so, but just really looking at the numbers. I mean, dynamic guys, Brady Allen, 5 homers in the league. Peyton Wilson's hit 4 leadoff home runs, to lead the SEC this year from Alabama. Liam Spence, Bradfield at Vanderbilt. There's a lot of dynamic leadoff hitters. And then they've got power and stuff down the lineup. And then they got a 9-hole hitter that's as good as anybody in the league, and he's a veteran guy. And he hits for power and hits for average, and so they just have all the check marks when you look at them. Number 1 offense, number 1 pitching staff, and they know how to win.
The team I think people are hesitant to give credit for, maybe in comparison to how good they actually are, at least compared to the computers, is Tennessee. And I get it, right? Tennessee has not been that team that was in the conversation of the 5 or 6 elite teams in the league before the year. Tennessee has not been the team that has been to Omaha since, 05. So I think that everybody, given the history, has got some concerns about putting Tennessee in that upper echelon. But I'm looking today at the Massey composite rankings, which takes the human polls, which are probably a little lower on the Vols than the computers are, and the 4 or 5 computers out there that averages together. Tennessee's 3rd in Massey's composite ranking this morning. By the way, Vandy 1 and Arkansas 2 in that. I say this morning. I think they do this updated once a week. But you look at the Vols and just everything is pretty solid. Now, Pythagorean's got them overachieving by a couple of games, but even then, the record would be 23-7. But the Vols, that team to me that I continue to watch and going, are they the team that crashes the top 3 or 4 of the party? And I think there's maybe a better chance there than maybe the average SEC fan would figure.
Well, I like them. I think they have a good team. I mean, they have more wins than anybody in the SEC at 25. They're 25-5, 7-2 overall. They kind of had a nice start to the year with Georgia, LSU, and Alabama. I mean, they have 6 total SEC wins. Tennessee has 7. So Tennessee's got more wins than their first 3 opponents. I think we'll learn a little bit more about Tennessee the next 2 weeks. They host Florida this weekend, and then Vanderbilt next weekend, back-to-back home series. Then it's A&M and Kentucky and Missouri. So just say Tennessee goes 4-2 the next 2 weeks. They're 11-4 at the turn, and then you got A&M, Kentucky, and Missouri. I could see them winning 6 or 7 of those, and being right there with the last 2 weekends of the season being Arkansas at home and at South Carolina. And I think if they can sustain what they're doing, that South Carolina Tennessee series on the last weekend of the season could be for the second spot in the East, maybe challenging Vanderbilt for the East championship. And who knows, they may be playing for a super regional host that weekend between those two teams. It could come down to those two teams. But I think the Vols are legit. I think I think they are very patient at the plate. They take a lot of walks. They lead the league in walks as an offense, and they have the fewest walks of any pitching staff in the league. They throw a ton of strikes. They don't wow you. You look at them and you're like, but they're good. I mean, they their lineup's pretty good. Liam Spence, we talked about him a minute ago, as a leadoff hitter, dynamic leadoff hitter, battling a little bit of a hamstring injury, but still hitting 400 on the year. And just a good team. They're just a good college baseball team, and that's what you're looking for. I mean, they don't knock your socks off like Vanderbilt does, and you're just like, wow. But you watch them play, and they're like, they don't make errors, they don't walk people. They take walks. They're very patient. They drive the pitch count up. And I think the next 2 weeks will tell a lot about the Vols.
Well, I think they seem to have enough arms. And the thing that I've said, yes, they have won some close games, and those things tend to even out. But you've got Max Ferguson and Connor Pavoloni and some of their guys that we thought would be their better hitters haven't hit yet. But here's the thing, Barry. You talked about the next 2 weekends. Let's say Tennessee comes out of that with 3-3 between Florida, which is in Lindsey Nelson Stadium in Knoxville this weekend, and then they host Vanderbilt next weekend, which they will be sky high for that one. I can't wait to see what tickets are going to go for there. Let's say the Vols go 3-3, which I don't think is unrealistic. They're 10-5, and then they've got series at Texas Tech, home against Kentucky, and Missouri in Columbia. If Tennessee comes out of this 3-3, all of a sudden, I think that team becomes a dark horse for title contention. Now, look, you got Arkansas, but that one's at home, and you go to Columbia. But I really think if Tennessee can just play 500 ball the next 2 weeks in conference, that's going to really be a game changer for that program.
Yeah, the next 2 weeks are key, and as we mentioned, the next 3 weeks kind of lightens up for them, but. They get ready for Florida. I mean, they have a history with Florida and have some, obviously want to win that series just because it's Florida. But then the next weekend, Vanderbilt, they recruit against Vanderbilt. They're probably sick of hearing about Vanderbilt, how good Vanderbilt is. Vanderbilt's won 2 national championships. Vanderbilt owns the state. Tim Corbin, Jack Leiter, Kumar Rocker, Dominic Keegan, Vanderbilt gets all the players in Tennessee they want, and Tennessee has to take what's left. And they're probably tired of hearing that. And, they probably feel like this year's a chance to, to give Vanderbilt, a hard time. And it's, be 3 really good games, this weekend with Florida and next weekend with Vanderbilt. And I'm sure they're excited about what the future holds for them. And I certainly think if they can, 3-3, 4-2, somewhere in there. Don't want to be 0-6 or 1-5, but if you can get, you're right. If you can get a split out of the next 2 weekends, they set themselves up really, really well.
What do we think about Ole Miss at this point? Because I think the Elko injury has got to have an impact, right?
Well, I think it does. I mean, but I said, we said earlier, this isn't the first injury they've had all year. I mean, they've seemed to have overcome. Shot Jay was out for a while. Nikhazy missed 2 starts. Baker, the first baseman's been out for several weeks, and they just kind of have plugged in. Now, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, to plug in an Elko because he's a middle-of-the-lineup guy, leads the league in RBIs. He leads your team in home runs. He's, one of your top hitters. He's one of the top players in the league, single-handedly won, a handful of games for them this year. Unfortunately for them, that comes at a really bad time when he gets hurt, because the next 2 weekends are Arkansas and Mississippi State, the 2 teams that, are really your challenge in the Western Division right now. And, they are at home against Arkansas. They're on the road at Mississippi State. I think they can go 3-3 the next 2 weeks. I think they still have a shot to, to make a run for the West. I don't think it's, unrealistic to think if they're 10-5 at the turn that they don't have a chance to be 20-5, perhaps. I do know they have South Carolina and Vanderbilt in the back half of the year, and those won't be easy with or without Tim Elko. So I think they've been able to sustain their team, even though they've had a ton of injuries. They've been able to just plug in and keep going. But I do think Elko will hurt them, and I'm interested to see how that will shake out this weekend when they host Arkansas.
I want to know if Mississippi State can score enough runs to be in contention at the end. And I think that's an outstanding team. Don't get me wrong. We are splitting hairs trying to determine who's the best at the very top, right? So that's what we're doing. I mean, State's got enough arms. They're going to host, if not be a national seed, or at least that's, I don't know what they call them anymore, but you know what I mean. A top 8 seed, I guess, is the terminology for it now. But in any case, I wonder about that team. It scored 38 runs in league play, which is, I think, 12th in the league. And look, I know that there's not any bad pitching staffs in the league, but they played LSU, Arkansas, and Kentucky, so it's not the toughest draw you could have gotten from a pitching standpoint. That's really what I want to see in Starkville is, do they have enough bats? And I'm wondering your opinion on that.
Yeah, they're 8th in the league in hitting, and I think they're, just looking at the numbers here, they're 11th, maybe 10th or 11th in runs scored, at 192. I think we said this Tuesday, and I'll say this again. If Rowdy Jordan goes, they'll go. And he has struggled. He has not had a good start. He has never had a good start. He's always been a slow starter. I think 3-hit game the other night, although it was against Southern, but he hadn't had a 3-hit game this year to my knowledge. And he looks like maybe he's trying to get that figured out. He's always been a really slow starter. I think 2 years ago he hit 186 in his first 20 some odd games, hit 340, 350 the rest of the year. I think if he goes, they go. I think he's a real catalyst at the top of their lineup. I mean, he's hit doubles, he can hit home runs, but just him getting on base and creating runs for them, creating some offense for them. Because I do think with Tanner Allen and Cameron James and Hatcher, some of those guys, although their batting averages are not great. Allen's hit 324 to lead their team. Their next leading hitter among the regulars is Rowdy Jordan, and he's hitting 286. I mean, it's pretty significant drop off. They don't have a ton of home runs. They've hit 27. They do have 46 doubles, hitting 272 as a team. But if they can get some of those guys going, Luke Hancock, is hitting 265. He's got 7 home runs. He leads their team in home runs. But if they can get Jordan going and they can generate some offense, I think they're really good. I mean, I think they're a super regional type team. I mean, we're not sitting here saying that Mississippi State's not good. You're not saying that, and I'm not either. But that would be a concern for me if Jordan doesn't hit and their offense, doesn't put some runs on the board. It's going to tax that pitching staff, and that pitching staff is incredible. But you can only hold up for so long, with trying to go out and hold a team to 2 runs, which they're capable of doing it. But you can only hold out for so long against really good clubs, and they're going to run into some of those here in the next few weeks.
The other one, I'm really curious to see how this ends with is Florida, because the Gators really just didn't look good out of the gate. That surprised us all. Continued not to look good for a couple of weeks. They got trounced by Florida State, as we noted. Got beat by Miami, which was something that doesn't normally happen. And then I think a couple of weekends ago, when they get swept at South Carolina, we're like, okay, this isn't the team we thought it was. But then they shake up the pitching a little bit. They take 2 out of 3 from Ole Miss, win a couple of midweek games in the meantime, and now have got Tennessee and Knoxville. Do we have a read on where this is headed for the Gators, especially with Judd Fabian continuing not to hit?
Well, I think if you look at Tennessee, that was a shakeup last week and a big series win. Now can they go on the road and do that this week against Tennessee? And I'm not saying they sweep, but if they could go to Knoxville and win 2 this weekend, they're 7-5. And then all of a sudden you got Missouri, Auburn the next 2 weeks, which you could conceivably be, you could win them all, 5-1 probably. Then all of a sudden you're feeling pretty good about yourself when you go to Nashville the first weekend of May, and then they close with Kentucky, Georgia, and at Arkansas to end the year. But they have, they've been up and down, and this is a critical weekend for Tennessee, or for Florida going to Tennessee. Now I will say this: they ruled Florida A&M last night, and Judd Fabian hit a 3-run home run. And the breaking news out of that game is Judd Fabian didn't strike out. And I know that's against FAMU, but still, I mean, he's the master of strikeouts. In fact, he did not strike out against Stetson or FAMU in either of their games this week. And he went 2 for 6 with a homer and 4 RBI in those games. So if he can cut down on those strikeouts and he can be that middle of the order guy, I see they dropped him the last 2 nights to 5th in the batting order. If he can be that guy and eliminate those strikeouts with Mace and Leftwich and Barco and Alamon and that Christian Scott and everybody that they have in that bullpen, it could be a game changer for the Gators. I mean, they're looking at a chance to go to Knoxville this weekend and win, and then have Missouri Auburn. I mean, Fabian has batted 114 at bats. He struck out 46 times, but he's only struck out once in the last 3 games. He had struck out every game this season. He's had at least 1 strikeout now, except 4, and 2 of those have come in the last 2 games. Of course, he had that dreadful game in that 14-inning game at South Carolina when he was 0 for 6 with 5 strikeouts. But if he can be patient at the plate, not chase pitches out of the zone, which I've seen him do, and that's hard to do. It's hard not to chase a 95-mile-an-hour fastball up in your eyes. But if he can lay off that and cut down on those strikeouts, that'll help him and that'll help their offense. And then Florida, with their pitching, could be a different team.
By the way, the Vandy Florida series is in Gainesville, so that ups the outlook for them just a little bit more. But let's go to the bottom end of things here, because we said before the season, this is a league that the national media thinks can get 11, maybe 12 teams. In the tournament, Missouri's not going. They're just, that's the worst team in the league. Auburn, I came out feeling a little bit better about the Tigers after the way they played Arkansas, but still 1-8 at this point, Barry. Is there enough there to make a miracle run at a bid?
I don't know. I don't know that there is. I don't know that LSU, Auburn, or Alabama at this point, can make a serious run, to get a bid. I think at this point any of those 3 would have to win the tournament, and SEC tournament, that is, and 2 teams are not going to make it. And right now it would be 2 Western Division teams, because Missouri's got and Georgia both have more wins than Auburn and LSU. So if the tournament started today, Auburn and LSU would be left at home, 2 Western Division teams. But I don't know. I don't know that they can come back enough from a 1-8 hole. They've done it before. They were 0-9 in 2001 and ended up making the tournament, winning a tiebreaker. But I think they got Mississippi State at home this week, and then Auburn plays at Alabama next week. I think whoever wins the most games between Auburn, Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M, obviously, another moment. But that will be a team that will boost themselves in the rankings, or the standings anyway, and give them a better shot at Hoover, and maybe a better shot, at the regionals, trying to get in. But just these bottom 3 teams in the SEC just really scuffling right now, and even A&M. I mean, you look at Alabama; they're 1-9 since beating Arkansas 16-1 in Fayetteville on opening night. Alabama's first 3 SEC opponents were 21-6. Now, if you're Brad Bohannon and you're looking this morning and going, geez, but you look at their next 4 opponents, they're 12-24, A&M, Auburn, Kentucky, Missouri. So Alabama might feel like they have a little hope. Texas A&M, who we crowned SEC whatevers when we had the 11-game winning streak going to Florida. They're 3-9 since that day, including the sweep to Florida, and 11-16 in their first three opponents in the league. But the next 4 weeks they play Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi State, who are 21-15. I think A&M has to win this weekend against Alabama at home to have any kind of chance to make the postseason beyond the SEC tournament, or maybe even the SEC tournament, because I think their schedule gets tougher. And Auburn and LSU both. LSU, their worst start since 1969 at 1-8. They've lost their number one pitcher, Jaden Hill, and their schedule's not going to get any easier either, because they still haven't played Ole Miss or Arkansas, and that's not going to get any easier either for them. So the bottom teams are, they're scuffling, and when they play the bottom teams, they got to win. I mean, if you got to go get these teams that you think you can beat, and you have to steal some on the road, and try to give yourself a chance to get back in the hunt for Hoover and for the hunt for the postseason. But I'm not sure for some of these teams that's even at 3 weeks in, if that's going to be possible.
I think Auburn, it's going to be a tough needle to thread, but if Auburn is going to get in the hunt, and I hold that out is a very, very slim possibility, because I think the pitching is going in a better direction. Cody Greenhill's been good. We talked about Richard Fitz the other day. I'm going to say that if there's a snowball's chance, it's going to have to start with Auburn taking a series from Mississippi State at home this weekend. That would put them 3-9. Then you got Alabama next weekend. You win that, things get a little better. You got Florida, but it's at Plainsman Park. But you close with Georgia, LSU, A&M, and Missouri. So it's a little bit easier down the stretch. But Auburn has almost just killed itself entirely with that 1-8 start.
Yeah, the bullpen has really let them down. I mean, you mentioned Greenhill. He's third in the league in ERA. And you and I talked yesterday, and he made our Southeastern top 14 pitchers in our power rankings. He's given up 3 runs in 3 SEC starts, and pitched really well in those games. He's 3-0. He's got the 162 ERA and the 168 batting average. Jack Owen coming back last week was a huge shot in the arm for them. Gonzalez now the number 3 guy. I would assume they'll stay with that rotation this weekend. It's early this morning. I don't think they've announced their pitching plans just quite yet for the weekend. But if those 3 guys can do this weekend and next weekend and beyond what they did at Arkansas, and somehow their bullpen figures it out with guys that can come in and close games. I mean, it becomes a mental thing to me when you're up 4 with 2 on in the 8th inning, and you're sitting there as a team, you're at shortstop or you're in the bullpen, and you go, oh God, how are we going to lose this one? Then it becomes mental, because you've lost the ball. You haven't won one of these games, so you don't know how to win one of these games. And they're not awful pitchers, and they're not an awful team. They just hadn't closed games out, and they don't know how to do it. And they got to find somebody that can come in and close it out. And when they do that, I thought maybe they had a little bit of confidence Friday night when they closed the game out Friday night, and then they come back Saturday and Sunday and blow leads of 5-0 and 4-0 and lose games, or Friday and Saturday. I keep forgetting they were Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. But they just don't know how to close the games out. They've not had success doing that. And until they do, it's going to be really difficult no matter who they're playing.
Alabama in the same spot, and Alabama's had some good pitching. Of course, it's been without its top arm, Connor Prelip, but Alabama is kind of in that spot now where it's got A&M at Bluebell Park. You win a couple there, things look a little better. Auburn next week, and I think that's a death sentence for whoever loses that series. But in Kentucky, Missouri, again, nothing easy in the SEC. But these are the teams you want to be playing right now to start a run, and that's what's right in front of Alabama in the next month. My question to you is Alabama going to be healthy enough to make any kind of a run through that part of the schedule? And, oh, by the way, D1 Baseball did its regional projections yesterday. And I know you think this is nonsense, and it's frankly hard to do these right now, but D1 had Alabama as the last team making the field despite a 2-7 record. And, again, some of that was projection. but I can see a way that it happens. But my question is, will Alabama have enough of its big guns to make a run? So where are we standing with that?
Yeah, the big key for them is they're like everybody else. Everybody has injuries over the course of the season, but their best guy hadn't pitched since the first weekend. Connor Prelip has missed 6 starts. This will be his 7th missed start of the year. Connor Shamblin left Sunday's game with Tennessee with an injury. He's iffy this weekend. Brock Guffey is iffy this weekend. Antoine Jean, who has missed the last 2 weekends as their number 3 starter, still a question mark about him. I mentioned Guffey in the bullpen, and Chase Lee missed the Ole Miss series, pitched 3 innings last week against Tennessee. There may be still some stuff going on with him. So we'll see if he's available again this weekend. If those 5 guys aren't available, they're in trouble. I mean, they're just flat out in trouble because they just don't have enough. They just don't have enough. I mean, they came in the 11th inning last Saturday night against Tennessee, and they used 2 pitchers whose ERAs were over 13 and over 8, and that's a recipe for disaster in this league. Especially against good offenses. So their injuries have really mounted up for them. If they can get these guys back, they got a chance. If they don't, I can't see them. I don't know if they can win a series if you got 3 or 4 of your top arms out. I just don't see how that could work. They have gotten Hameter back in the lineup. He narrowly missed a game-tying home run yesterday. They did lose yesterday at home to ULM 5-3 to continue this slide that they're in. That they're 1-9 in their last 10 games, but they've got to get some arms back. They've got to get some guys healthy, and if they can't, I think it's going to be a long rest of the year for them.
Georgia's in that spot, too, where it goes to Vandy this week, and I think if it can just avoid being swept, that's good, because then it's got Kentucky, Missouri, Auburn, 2 of those at home, Missouri on the road the next 3 weekends. And then it gets brutal down the stretch, but you start banking enough wins in this league, everybody knows how tough it is. I think maybe that 13-17 team, which Georgia could end up being potentially, gets you the benefit of the doubt in this league this year.
It might. I very well could, because the league is so good up front, up top. With Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Arkansas, it very well could give you that shot at 13. I'm thinking, that means they've got to win 10 games to get to 13. Looking at their schedule, but as you mentioned, they've got to get one somehow at Vanderbilt this weekend. I don't know if they can, but they have to try to get one. Avoid sweeps at all costs. Even if you're playing bad, biggest thing is just, you always hear people, just don't get swept. And if you get swept, then now you got to go win 2 series, to catch up. And it's kind of like going for 2 in football, and you don't make it, then you got to go for 2 every time just to catch up. And and then you just keep getting further and further behind. And now all of a sudden you're like, well, dang, if we just kicked extra points, we'd be tied right now instead of being 4 down, because we've had to go for 2 so many times. But getting swept, it just puts you behind the 8 ball. But Georgia's got pitching; they've got a little offense, although they did not swing the bats Tuesday night at all. You only had 4 hits and a midweek loss to Georgia Southern. Did not have a hit in the last 5 innings of that game against Georgia Southern. Lost 2-1. So they got to try to find some offense and just keep pitching, and it's not going to be easy this weekend at Vanderbilt, but it does help them a little bit the next couple of weeks, that they make, if they get one in Nashville this weekend, then they can, see a little bit of light and maybe pick up some series wins or pile a few wins up and build their resume and try to get, to that 12 or 13 number, to get into Hoover and then maybe make a run into the NCAA tournament.
I'm looking at the Massey composite rankings, and this doesn't mean anything, right? Because that's not what the tournament committee is going to go by. But you got Vandy 1, Arkansas 2, Mississippi State 4, Tennessee 3, Ole Miss 5, South Carolina 9, Florida 17, Georgia 30, Alabama 32, Kentucky 42, LSU 34. So if you go on that, you got 10 or 11 teams that are tournament worthy just by that number alone, which again means nothing, but it does tell you maybe how good these teams are. I don't see, though, the league getting more than 8 in, and I could see a scenario where it's 7, Barry, just because of what we've been saying all along. There's only so many wins to go around.
Yeah, there is. I mean, and 1-8s and 2-7s, and it's just, those are hard to overcome. I mean, Auburn, LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, Missouri, Georgia, all with just 3 wins. I mean, it's really, those are deep holes to dig. And if you do that again the next 3 weeks, you look at Auburn and LSU, you're 2-16. If you do the same thing again, it's just, they're just big holes to dig out of. And I don't see the really good teams, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Arkansas, Ole Miss. I don't see them losing 2-3, consistently on weekends, and you just keep falling further and further behind. But this is still a good league. It's just maybe a little bit more top heavy than we thought. I mean, Warren Nolan's got Arkansas number 1 in his RPI as of today, and then 4, 5, and 6 is South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee. You got 4 of the top 6 teams, and I guess you could, Villanova's got to, maybe they'll start playing in the conference, and we'll figure that out a little bit. But they're number 2, and Arizona's number 3 in that. I think Villanova probably checks out of there once they start getting in the league and start playing teams. And you look at Mississippi State, they're number 9. So 5 of the 9 in Warren Nolan this morning are SEC teams, and so it just shows you how much strength there is at the top. But the bottom teams, when they play the bottom teams, you gotta go get those series, and some of them you got to get. If you're home, you may have to try to sweep to try to catch up.
Yeah, Fairfield has been one of the flies in the ointment of the RPI. We've kind of joked about that all year, that because some of those Northeastern teams didn't get a start and then ran 12-2 out of the gate or whatever, you had Villanova and Fairfield, I think both in the top 5 of the RPI. Fairfield 10-0 and finally dropped to 16 as of Thursday morning. Western Carolina, another team that's a little bit out of place in there at 15-7. But yeah, I think the RPI in the next couple of weeks will start to settle in a little bit, but I can't see the league being in a spot where, I mean, frankly, and that's the thing, right? If these teams at the lower end are losing these games and falling out of NCAA tournament contention, I think the flip side of that is I think you could see the league get 5 of the top 8 seeds, and I think it would be deserved.
I agree. Because there's nothing, there's nothing that says that Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, those 6 teams, maybe even Florida, those 7 teams, who says they're not? They may all be top 16s and host and have that. And you say, well, they have 7 hosts and then 5 are super regional hosts. Well, that's the only teams that got in because those teams are really, really, really good. And the flip side of that too is, Vanderbilt's RPI may come down because they've played LSU. They're going to play Alabama. They're going to play Missouri. They've played Missouri. They're going to play Georgia. But, I think you just have to look at, these teams individually and just see how good they are. We talked about Vanderbilt. We talked about them being the best team. We think they're the best team in the league. I mean, these guys have won 15 straight SEC road games and 20 straight SEC games away from Hawkins Field against opponents. I mean, their last 5 SEC series they've played on the road, they've swept every one of them, dating back to Easter weekend of 2019 at Alabama. I mean, that's hard to do. I mean, it doesn't matter who. If you're playing Missouri, Georgia, and Alabama, it doesn't matter. It's hard to go 5 straight SEC road series and sweep. And they've done it over 3 years because last year, obviously, no series were played. But, that'll get challenged probably at Tennessee next week. And then when they play Florida. But, I mean, that's pretty impressive to win 15 straight SEC road games. That's 5 straight sweeps. And I don't know anybody that's ever done that in this league. I mean, that's really incredible.
Yeah, and for point of clarification, those have all been against bottom half of the league teams and teams that probably weren't going to regionals or didn't or aren't. But still, like you said, that's impressive. I don't care who you're playing. And Vanderbilt's last win came in Baton Rouge, swept LSU down there, which, as I went on record saying, I didn't think was going to happen. I thought LSU would take that series. It did not. That's a program I really wanted to hone in on for a couple of minutes, Barry, because you had the Jaden Hill injury. You've got a 1-8 mark in the league. you've got a fan base that was already getting very restless about Paul Mainieri. And I just wonder how this is going to play out for the Tigers and for Paul Mainieri next year. I'm just wondering if you think, can he survive this without a miraculous turnaround, which again becomes a lot harder to pull off with no Jaden Hill for the rest of the season?
Yeah, it makes it tough. I would hope he could. I think he's a good coach, and I think he's a good person, and I think he takes care of his kids at LSU really well. But I mean, I know it's, I know we're in a society today that's, win or else, and I know that's how people think. I mean, I know people that have won. I mean, he's won a national title. He's been to Omaha several times. I know people that's had, good seasons, and they say, well, he just can't win. I mean, I hearken back to, back to SEC football history, but, LSU fired Charlie McClendon because he couldn't beat Alabama. Tennessee fired Bill Battle because he couldn't beat Alabama. And then they hired people, and guess what? They still couldn't beat Alabama. So, it's funny how that, we just got to win. Well, then so we're going to go get somebody else. And you're like, well, okay, well, who are you going to go get? Well, I don't know. Well, if you're going to get rid of somebody, you better have somebody really good to replace him, because you're going to be doing it again. You can look at Alabama basketball. They may have finally found their guy, but, it took Mark Gottfried, Philip Pearson as an interim, Anthony Grant and Avery Johnson, and they didn't really solve anything. But now they got Nate Oates. So you may be better off with what you have than trying to go out and, find somebody else. And they said, well, anybody would come to LSU and be the coach. Well, I mean, I like Smoke Laval. He's one of my friends, but it didn't work for him either. And he was one of Skip's guys. That didn't work. And then he's gone to, down into Florida, and they've played, his teams have played well there. But if you're going to run somebody off, you're going to find replace a coach, because, and this is not an LSU year. I mean, this is way, 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 way below LSU standards. I mean, 1-8, they're not even, that's not even in the same stratosphere where they think they should be. And, but if you're going to run somebody off, you better have somebody better than him. And, that's easier said than done. And maybe they can't salvage the year. Maybe they can't, losing Hill. But he hadn't pitched great anyway. But, they did get DiGiacomo back the other night in the outfield. Maybe that'll spark them. They do have good players. They can hit. But their issues are, on the mound, and they continue to struggle there. But hopefully he can survive it. But, we don't make that decision. That belongs to LSU. And, I mean, if they got enough people screaming and hollering, they may have to make a hard decision at the end of the year as to where they go with their program.
All right, we've got our silent partner, Blake Lovell, who's been sitting out here patiently for 43 minutes and has not uttered a word in the podcast yet. Blake is still decompressing from basketball, to be honest. But Blake, I know you're gonna follow baseball. You're getting back into it a little bit. Just curious if you had anything to chime in with here with questions or thoughts.
No, just letting you guys cover it all there. Like you said, we're still in decompression mode from the basketball season, and we're working on a lot of good stuff over on the site. Like you said, we're looking at baseball, of course. We've got some football stuff in the works. That's actually what I've been working on since you guys have been talking. But we got a lot of stuff on the way over there at the site, and so it's always fun. Obviously, this time of year, and basketball season's over and all that, but this is, as you guys have mentioned, I mean, this is where you start to look ahead to the tournament baseball, and there's lots to figure out, as you guys have talked about. So it should be fun, kind of stretch run of the season here to kind of see how many of those teams do make it from the SEC. So,
well, speaking of new stuff, we debuted the 4 teams for pitchers and position players and hitters yesterday, where we rank our top 14 hitters and our top 14 pitchers. That was a fun exercise to do. Any thoughts on that, Barry?
Well, I just think, you look at some of these guys, you and I talked about it, and we spent a lot of time trying to determine, who we thought the best hitters were based on, runs created. You use some of the Bill James formulas, displayed for total runs created as well as created over 27 outs, and just kind of, it was kind of ran through the league and came up with a lot of different names, and it was Vanderbilt heavy and just trying to get, we still think Wes Clark's the best hitter in the league despite his struggles in league play, but he does still lead the nation in home runs. I think, Liam Spence is, there. We talked about him. Elko with the injury, still found his way to be the third on the team. Carter Young, Nathan Hickey at Florida has done really well. Dylan Cruz, Dominic Keegan, SEC's leading hitters. A lot of really good hitters. Had 3 Vanderbilt guys in the top 9. Peyton Wilson made the list at 10, Brady Allen, and then we did the same thing with our pitchers. And you look at some of these guys, you think, well, how some of these teams have struggled on the mound. But yet we both felt like that, despite Auburn's 1-8 record, we felt like Cody Greenhill, was one of the top guys in the league, and he made our top 10. And Tennessee had a couple of guys in there, and we had Dylan Smith from Alabama at number 7, despite not having a win. But his team doesn't score for it. I mean, 7 starts, they've scored 8 runs when he's on the mound, and that's hard to do. I don't know that Koufax could win many games like that. And obviously, another moment. But Leiter, Rocker, and 1-2, and Marceau from LSU was second or third on the list, and then Gunnar Hoagland from Ole Miss was 4th, and Tommy Mace was 5th. So it just shows you the depth of the league, how many good hitters and how many good pitchers we have. And it was a fun exercise to do. I think our team power rankings will go up, today. And I think you obviously know that, we lean towards Vanderbilt 1 again and Arkansas 2. And, check that out and see where we have the teams going into the 4th weekend of the regular season in SEC play.
One guy that really stood out to me in the hitting rankings was Dylan Cruz at LSU. And he came in as a very highly touted prospect, but frankly, we've seen a lot of guys that are pretty highly touted. And that he got through the draft. He was a little bit a level higher than most of the guys who come to school. He was an elite guy, probably could have been a first rounder a year ago. But the point I'm making is we see a lot of guys that are elite hitters, but it takes you a while to get used to things. The fact that he's a top 5 or 6 hitter in the league this early in his career as a freshman, to me, that just points out the fact that he is going to be, I think, as special as everybody thought. And really, when you get that level of hype, you can almost only disappoint, but he has not done that to this point for sure.
No, he hasn't. He came in with all the credentials and all the accolades, and 7-8 weeks in, he's proved it. I mean, he's a dynamic hitter, elite SEC hitter, a good outfielder, and everybody certainly can see why he's one of the top, prospects in the 2023 draft. Down the road, it's just the talent that he has. I mean, he can, just a tremendous hitter and can do everything for them. And his future is only going to get better at LSU. He's going to be one of the top hitters in this league for several years.
Yeah, I think I could probably count on one hand the last decade the number of freshmen who've had this good a hitting season right off the bat like he's had. Barry, anything else in our power rankings or any loose ends we didn't get to with the podcast? Because I know we had a lot of stuff to discuss. I may have taken us off script, but I just think that the seeding discussion and the power rankings right now are a very interesting topic. What is it that you wanted to discuss today maybe that we didn't get to?
Well, we've talked about it a little bit, but I think the 2 key series this weekend are, West and East. I think Arkansas at Ole Miss and Florida at Tennessee. I think everybody would agree those are the 2 headline, series in this league this weekend. The 2 Western Division leaders squaring off in Oxford, and then, Florida trying to keep it going after, coming back from being swept at South Carolina, trying to keep things going on the road, going to Knoxville to play a Tennessee team who's really hot. If you look at Florida, the road has not been kind to them of late. They've lost 5 of their last 6 road series, and they've been swept 4 times, including this year at South Carolina a few weeks ago. So it's a critical weekend for the Gators. I don't think they can, obviously can't stand to be 5-7, but if they can get one this weekend against the Vols, and Tennessee can keep things going, that they do. But I think those are critical series the two most critical series to me, one in the East and one in the West, as we go into the fourth week of the SEC season.
I think it's deserved, and I know there's a little projection in this, but it was really weird to look at D1 baseball and look at Florida sitting there as the number 2 seed in the Miami Regional according to their projections. Or I guess that's the Coral Gables Regional to be exact, but that just is not something I thought we'd be seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it just, you just don't think that, especially going into the season, as preseason number 1 team. But they've just, they've kind of scuffled a little bit. They just haven't, they got off to kind of a slow start, and they've been up and down. And they're still, to me, they're still up and down. They sweep, they get swept, they win 2 out of 3. So they need a little consistency, a little bit more consistency. And we've talked about, trying to get Fabian to hit too. But, they can still get things going and turn things around, and they can be the Gators that we expected. But, as of right now, they're not. But that's why this is a critical weekend for them in Knoxville.
Well, Barry, we will have power rankings of the teams coming up later today. Again, we have done the hitters and the pitchers, so be sure and check that out at southeastern14.com. That's free. Anything else to close the podcast today that's worth a mention, Barry?
No, I think we've covered everything. I mean, we talked about injuries, and everybody's got injuries, and just teams try to persevere and fight on through some tough spots. And we've mentioned Alabama and Texas A&M, but that's a series this weekend in College Station, a 1-9 team in their last 10 games taking on a team that's 3-9 in their last 12 games. Two teams that are really, really scuffling, and as a big series for both, probably more of a big series for A&M because it's at home than it is for Alabama. But both teams have to win. I mean, it's a must series win for both, and Auburn can't afford to get swept at home by Mississippi State. They've got to try to keep their head above water. 1-8, they can't afford to be 1-11 and try to get going in this league. And you look at LSU 1-9 going to Kentucky, and in the Battle of Columbia, Missouri at South Carolina this weekend. Another opportunity for South Carolina. We said this Tuesday, and I'll say it again today. They lost to Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter and were no hit on Saturday by Jack Leiter, and they're 0-2, and they've lost 7 in a row because they were swept at Texas. And South Carolina's at a crossroads, and they're not exactly feeling too good about themselves. They're 6-1 in their last 7 SEC games. They came back because of a Brady Allen and Braylon Wimmer home run and beat Vanderbilt in Game 3, and then they swept Florida at home for the first time since 2006. And then last weekend they go to Athens and win 2 out of 3 for the first time since 2010. And I know they lost Tuesday night to North Carolina. And what a fantastic game that was, a super regional type game in Charlotte in the AAA ballpark. North Carolina won 3-2 in extra innings. Tough loss for the Gamecocks, but they only had 3 hits. But if you're going to have a letdown, rather have a letdown, I guess, in the midweek against a good North Carolina team than this weekend against Missouri. But a red hot Gamecock team going in 6-1 in their last 7 SEC games, taking on Missouri and this weekend. And this series has always favored the home team. In fact, Missouri's has never won a series. They haven't ever won a game in Columbia, South Carolina, that is. So the Gamecocks looking to keep that streak going along. But they're a hot team right now, particularly in SEC, based on what they did by losing to Rocker and getting no hit by Leiter. They've come light years in the last 7 games.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me till now. We kind of neglected the Gamecocks today. I think that's a really good team and a potential top 8 seed too. And this works both ways because Carolina got out of Nashville with the 6-5 win in the last day. But that game 1 was close into the latter innings. Vanderbilt wins at 3-2. You flip that outcome there. South Carolina is 7-2 in the league. Vanderbilt's 7-2 in the league. You got a 3-way tie, top of the league standings, and all of a sudden, I think we're talking about Carolina a lot more just with that one change.
Absolutely, and I still think we talk about them just because I think they're good. I mean, just what they've been able to do. I mean, it was the 4th game. No, excuse me, it was the 5th game of the year in the league before Wes Clark got a hit in SEC play. He was like 0 for 16. He homered against Florida on Saturday, jump-started that win. And he homered in the next game. He homered last week in a critical spot to beat Georgia. But Brady Allen, to me, has been their catalyst on offense. I mean, hit a first pitch leadoff home run Sunday at Georgia in a game where they got a win to win the series, and they win. He's hit 5 home runs in SEC play. He's got more home runs than any other Gamecock in SEC play with the 5. They've all been on Sunday, which is really weird. Last game of the series, but he hit 2 against Florida, 2 against Georgia, 1 at Vanderbilt to jumpstart their offense against Schultz, who through 3 innings was 9 up, 9 down. And when you go back Saturday with Jack Leiter, 36 straight Gamecocks retired, and Brady Allen goes, we got to get going. And he pops a home run, and then Wimmer pops a home run. And they're different teams since then. And they've played really well. And moving Sanders to the rotation and Bosnick to the bullpen has been a really good thing for them. And they got Brett Carey in the bullpen, who's an innings eater and can pitch 2 days on the weekend. I like them. I like their team. They're probably as deep a pitching staff as they've had in quite a while. And I like their offense. And this is kind of the South Carolina that we're used to seeing when Ray Tanner was the coach.
Yeah, and Brett Carey, I really like that guy. I couldn't quite put him in the 14 because he's only pitched, I think, 20 in the 3rd innings, and the guys that were in front of him that pitched fewer innings just had next-level dominance. But I think he is a great player for them. He's a save-their-bacon guy. He's the guy that you can bring in with the 3-2 game in the 3rd, and, you're running out of arms, and he can give you 6 innings or whatever it is. And I just think a guy like that in a high leverage spot has a lot of value. He won them that game 3 in Nashville opening weekend of the year because he did that. He came in and he just shut down Vanderbilt at a time where they were hitting Julian Bosnick really well. But anyway, Barry, I've got to run to get on to some other stuff. I know you guys do too. Thanks to Blake and Barry for joining me on the podcast today. We'll have some content up at the Southeastern 14 today with our power rankings. Of course, we'll have recaps of the action Thursday night, Friday night. We'll have another podcast Friday to maybe talk about some of the things that we see in SEC baseball on Thursday night. For Blake Lovell and Barry Allen, I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Southeastern 14 podcast. We'll see you back again on Friday.